So welcome everyone to today's presentation by David Den Hartog for the Green Schools National Network. I am the community organizer for Northern Arizona Climate Change Alliance in the West region. And our organization is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that educates and empowers people at a grassroots level for action. And our work is primarily focused in Flagstaff, Sedona, Verde, and the Prescott areas. And we hope you enjoyed this presentation. We are kind of probably going to be wrapping up our virtual presentations and transitioning to in-person. So we have an in-person Verde volunteer meeting coming up in June at the library. So that's kind of exciting. And I'm going to go ahead and drop some links in the chat box because we encourage you to learn more about our organization and make a donation. We are a nonprofit, people powered, so anything that you can do to help would be great. And also we have volunteer teams in all those areas that I mentioned. And so if you click on the link and fill it out, we would connect you with the group that's organized in your area. I'm excited to bring this education piece to NASCA. It's kind of the first time we've done something like this. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you a little bit about David Den Hartog. He's the Director of Learning and Partnerships at the Green Schools National Network. He's dedicated to helping schools and districts leverage education for sustainability as the driver for excellence. David's experience as a school principal, classroom teacher, and regional school designer, along with the opportunities he has had to learn from educators around the US and world, fueled his optimistic, passionate dedication to educational excellence. He is also a former resident of Prescott, Arizona, and a good personal friend of mine, and Joe Howard, who is on this presentation joining us. So everybody welcome David Den Hartog to our program.
Thanks, Gary. It's a pleasure to be with you all, and I'm excited to share with you a little bit about the work that I'm doing, but the work that our organization, the Green Schools National Network, is doing around the country, and how it might relate or apply to the work that any of you all are doing. Since we're a relatively small group, I would be curious just to know who's here. So I know Carrie and Jenna. Maybe Jenna, if you don't mind, do a quick introduction of yourself, and then each of the rest of us, just to say who you are and where you are and what your role is or your connection to this work or school. So we'll start with you, Jenna, and then you pass it to the next person.
Thank you, David. Jenna Ortega. I live in Munns Parks and I work in Flagstaff and Sedona, so I'm kind of conveniently located. And I'm passionate about environmental education and really just getting young people engaged in the community and in environmental action. So that's why I'm here and happy that David agreed to talk with us today. And I will pass it to Joe since he is next on my screen.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Joe Howard. I'm the superintendent of the Prescott Unified School District in Prescott, Arizona. And let's see, on my 18th year in the district and 30 some in the area. So very passionate about the topic that we're talking about today and how to tie that in into a pretty mainstream public school setting.
Who do you pass to, Joe?
I'll speak up. I'm Bonnie Lane. I am a volunteer in the Verde Valley. I've been here for about 4.5 years, and I'm thrilled to have found NASCA and our mission of educating people in general.
Awesome. Thank you, Bonnie.
Hi, I'm Natalie Jacobs, and I'm excited to be here. I've worked a little bit with NASCA and CCL, and I did actually work with this student a couple years ago in Flagstaff. That's where I'm located. I'm totally blanking. I think it's Students for Climate Action or Schools for Climate Action. Is that the group? to get their school to pass a climate resolution. And he was successful in doing that. But then it seemed like some other schools didn't want to even go there. And I just, anyway, got busy with other things, but I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Natalie.
I guess I'll go next. I'm Jessica. I'm a clinical social worker, and I currently live in Flagstaff, but telecommute to North Carolina for my practice. So one of the, I guess, benefits that's come from the pandemic is more ability to telecommute. And I do not necessarily have a specific connection to students, but I just thought this topic was interesting. And my theory is if we could teach students stuff, that usually means we could use that same information with adults. So I just want to learn more about it.
Awesome. Thanks, Jessica.
Mm-hmm.
And Melissa.
Hi, I'm Melissa. I am in Prescott Valley. I work with Early Head Start, and I'm very passionate about the gardening and the environment and things like that. And so I just hope to share that not only with my coworkers, but with the families that I serve.
Awesome. Great. Well, I'm super glad that you all could make it. And then I know it, like Joe mentioned, it's a Friday afternoon, and it's not necessarily the easiest time. And we have everybody has plans for the weekend, but I'm, grateful that you all decided to give some energy and time to be here and learn a little bit more about work that's happening around the country and how we could bring more of this work to Arizona and to your communities and with the students that are in your communities. So I'm going to share my screen here and just run through a slide deck. Carrie, while I go through, we'll see how well she does this, but she's going to throw a few links in here as we go. Our first one is just our organization, Green Schools National Network. We're a national nonprofit that works with schools and districts across the country. Our basic vision is that we, believe that future generations thrive by shaping sustainable schools. And so, we're at a precipice, honestly, as humans, and we need more education for sustainability. And so that's our vision, and that's our mission, is that every student, every learner can attend and does attend a healthy, equitable, and sustainable school. Right now, as we all know and realize, that's not necessarily the case. Our network it's growing. We've been around a little over 10 years now, and we work with about 200 different schools in 13 states, but like you see, not in Arizona yet. But today I'm in New Mexico. I'm in Zuni, in the Zuni Pueblo. It's one of our districts that we work with. And yeah, super excited to be able to do that. So just some things to think about is that for the most part, education is not educating students for sustainability. Most of us are not living in a sustainable way. And what we see because of that, the ramifications for unsustainable living are some of these things: environmental degradation, social upheaval, the rise of authoritarianism around our world, and significant amount of emotional distress. So for us, this is at the core. Like, we want to really think about, what does it mean to live sustainably? And it means a lot of different things, but at the core for us, it means that we're all thriving, and that wealth is not defined by stuff, but it's defined by joy and how you're experiencing that, and contentment. And that conflict is not absent, but it's resolved peacefully. And that we're, number one, aware and connected to our best teacher, which is the earth. And for us as humans, most of us, not frankly, less of the people here in the Zuni in Pueblo, because they still say really connected to the earth, but many of us don't. And many of us don't think of the earth as a teacher and see ourselves very distant from that. And in schools, that's the case as well. So for us, we're thinking a lot about that. We use these basic frameworks to help us think about this. One is the Sustainable Development Goals, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. These were passed by 193 countries. Every single country in the United Nations voted for these. It was 193-0 that voted for the Sustainable Development Goals. Those are 17 significant goals that people have agreed to be working on. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, but what's interesting, I mean, lots of things interesting on the goals, but one of them is that how they're broken up is that there's 17 goals, but if you really look at them, only 3 of them are focused on the environment. 7 of them are focused on social justice, equity, and inclusion. And then 6 of those are on economics. So lots of times when we think of this work around sustainability, we almost entirely go to the environment, but we don't think as much about that social justice side and the equity side and the inclusion side. But I just want to point that out. With these 17 goals, 14 of them are something other than the environment. This video, we won't show today because it's 34 minutes, but it's a link, and you'll have all these slides that you can look at later. So if you don't catch all the links that Carrie puts in, you'll find them in the slides, but we'll get you a copy of those. But this is just a really nice video that showcases those different sustainable development goals. And what I'd like to do, just as for you all to get to know each other just a little bit better, and for us to think about these goals as I go through and talk a little bit more about what we're doing as an organization, is have you think about a goal, and I'm going to share this with you. I'll show you just one second. Oops. I have a Jamboard that I'm going to put in the chat, and it's, if I can move my screen here, here we go. So you're going to go to this Jamboard, and you're going to be in a breakout room with a couple other people. And with your group, I'm just going to tell you to pick one of these. So I have 4 different sustainable development goals. And what I want to have you think about with your team there is, what can schools do to accelerate this particular goal and relationship? What can schools accelerate? What can they do in relation to this particular goal? So if we're trying to get to zero hunger, Joe as a superintendent knows that they are doing some things already. What could we do even more of? What could we accelerate? So add your sticky note, and I'm sure somebody in your group is going to know how to do that. But add a sticky note to some of your ideas that you come up with. Jenna, do you have us in 3 different groups, or how many? Okay, 3 different breakout rooms. Great. And so when you go to the breakout room, pick your one that you want to focus on. You have zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, and responsible consumption and production. Okay, so I'm going to just make sure that you have that link, and I'll put that in the chat before we send you off to the breakout room. But you'll be with a couple people just for a few minutes, and at least one of you open up this Jamboard so that then you can put some of your thoughts in there with your team. So we'll just stay in there for about, let's just say 5 minutes with your group.
All right, almost there. And Carrie, you're gonna go to room 2, please. And thank you.
Okay. Hi, Sandy. You snuck in.
Hi. I know it. I almost forgot.
Oh, I'm glad you're here. Okay, so hi, Melissa.
Hi.
Let me see here. So I guess I need to pull up that little sticky thing, whatever. Let's see here. I don't know why he gives us these complicated things. He's so funny. Oh, I guess I can share my screen or something. Yeah, I guess I could do that. Let's see here. There, can you guys see it?
Now I can.
Okay. All
Yes.
right. Responsible consumption. That sounds really scary. Let's find a different one. They didn't tell us which one we could choose. So I kind of, good health and well-being.
I think good health and well-being or zero hunger are more from like what my program addresses, and
Okay.
I would have more information to speak to that, but
Let's do it. Okay, I'm gonna pull up a Post-it note. I'm really, once we do this, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do with it all, but we're gonna go with it. Okay, so we're supposed to come up with solutions that we think of for a classroom to help lead them to good health and wellness. Yeah.
Mhm.
This is what I've done in a classroom, is when, especially when they're doing something that like mathematics for the younger kids, that it's important that they have a break, dancing or moving. And
Mhm.
Love that.
A lot of my program is focused on parent education. And so educating parents about healthy diets for children and ways to make their food dollars stretch so they can afford the healthy diet. Because I also work with low income families, and you tend to hear, well, the bad for you food is cheaper, so that's why we buy it. And so part of what I'm passionate about is teaching them ways to cook and provide meals for their families that are healthier, but still within the budget.
Perfect. I guess I would give like some background to a classroom on the inequity. I don't know if you would say it that way, inequity of access to wellness in marginalized communities.
Okay.
So that they can, have an idea of what, that's always like for me, I feel like, especially I'm in Prescott, I grew up here. And so like, I had no idea what the rest of the world was. And we all know how isolated this community is. And so when I got to the age where I started learning about how, not all communities are the same, it was really eye-opening for me. And of course, I didn't learn that until I was like 30, but never too late. And that's why I believe so much in education, because the younger and the sooner you start educating people, that's where real change is going to happen. So, yeah, I mean, I like yours. We hit on exercise, diet, kind of education. I think we have, I guess that's it, huh? Well, that's about 5 minutes. Anything else that you want to throw on a sticky note? Shoot, I didn't know we had color choices. I would have picked a different color. It's fine. Okay, so now I guess this just shows up, and then I'll just share my screen. I don't know. We'll let him figure it out. Oh, time is up. Okay. And Melissa, you said you're in Prescott,
I'm Prescott Valley.
Oh,
Yeah.
so is Sandy.
Okay.
Wow.
Nice to see you.
Hi.
Okay, I'm gonna close now, so I think we're all gonna bump back to the main room. See you there.
All right, welcome back, everybody. That was just a few minutes, but let's hear from each group what you came up with, a few of your ideas. They're on the Jamboard. I think I'll show the Jamboard and see what some of those things are. So I'm gonna volunteer our group. So either Bonnie or Joe, why don't you highlight? You don't have to go through every one of these. People can see them, but what were a couple of them that stuck out to you?
Dave, I can talk about, we have gardens at our schools. And so that's a big piece for responsible consumption and production. And we were just talking about how we take it to the next level in terms, and that's where, I don't know, that's still up there, but we have, yeah, that's where we're, with the Vistas, we have Vista volunteers. We're on our second round there, and their role is to systemize and integrate outdoor learning. And so, you know, they're taking those gardens and hopefully taking, our goal is to take them to the next step, to where we're putting the food in front of the kids at school. So, and putting it also into the community. And then we also have a Hungry Kids program where some of that food goes into their backpacks on the weekend.
Nice. Yeah, thanks, Joe. And just as an organization, just so you know, Green Schools National Network, we work with both schools and districts that are on the front edge of this work and some that are just beginning. And one of them that is on the front edge is down in San Diego. It's a district, it's actually an elementary district. They're producing almost 75% of all the food that the kids eat. They produce either at the school sites, or they've got a school farm that they run, and the kids are all involved with. So there's some really amazing things going on around the United States with that. Cool. Let's look at, how about the group that did this one? Good health and well-being. Give us your quick overview.
Melissa, do you want to talk about our 3 hot topics here for good health and well-being?
I can try. So we were talking about incorporating movement during classroom time, just to get the kids' bodies and brains refreshed, get the oxygen, moving. Also, talking about how we can bring up in our classrooms about inequity to access to healthy food and to wellness, and marginalized communities and other communities surrounding us, that sometimes we get blinded to what we don't see. And so it needs to be talked about a little more. And then also spend time to talk about with students and families how to expand their budgets to include healthy foods, and to being able to make those healthy foods on a budget to feed their families.
Awesome. Thank you, Melissa. Yeah, these are great. I love these ideas. One of the districts we work with, Virginia Beach City Public School District, has 70,000 students. And what they've decided about 4 or 5 years ago is to go back to scratch cooking within every single one of their schools, because of getting away from all the processed foods that they were feeding their kids. And most schools do still. So that was a big step, is to, be producing all their own food for their students. But it relates to the exact thing that you're talking about, Melissa. Thanks. Let's hear about this from this one, Zero Hunger. What are quick summary from you all?
I always talk, so Natalie or Jessica, do you want to?
Sure. Yeah, I can. Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. So yeah, we talk, some of this is repetitive, but doing school gardens once again, and trying to grow, each school growing their own food, working with local farms and CSAs, community supported agriculture, to bring in local produce, minimizing food waste through compost. Also, because I said specifically, I know with my kids that are in elementary school, they are given very, very short periods of time to actually eat lunch. And part of the problem is they rush out to recess because it's all grouped together, like maybe 30 minutes total for lunch and recess. So giving them more time for recess, or again, like moving their bodies, and allowing the lunch hour to actually be a longer period, almost like a subject matter in school, where you go to lunch and you're able to really think about the food, especially if it's coming from a local garden or something like that, and incorporate more mindful eating, and then just being able to actually talk a little bit more civilized, because some of these school cafeterias, they're just kind of crazy. They're so loud and echoey. They're definitely not peaceful. I think, let's see, did I hit on everything? And accessibility for families as well, not just the kids. And we did talk about breakfast, making sure that kids have access to breakfast too, which some schools have that free breakfast or reduced costs, but making sure that kids are fed during the school day.
Thank you. What a good variety of things you have there. I love that. We all know that going through this pandemic, part of the struggle for a lot of students that were not at school was getting access to food, and how our schools provide such a service to give and help students and families with food. Most, I'm sure you did this, Joe, at Prescott, is provide, ways for people to come and get food, but it just points to the fact of how important our schools are, not just for learning, academics. There's so many other things that our schools do on behalf of our young people, and food is one of those big ones. Great, thanks you all. I'll go back to this presentation, but thinking about these SDGs and then framing it with the context of our schools that we work with is super important, and those SDGs are valuable. This is something that, another one that I want to share that I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with, but there are actually standards around education for sustainability. And so these 10 standards are what are used to frame a lot of this work. And being here in the Zuni Pueblo, and earlier today I was up with the Navajo, some Navajo folks, is so much of this is around is connecting to indigenous ways of knowing and indigenous ways of living. And so you see a lot of connections here, but these standards really get layered. A lot of the schools and districts, all of them that we work with are traditional schools and districts. So what they're doing is they're regular science, math, social studies, but layering sustainability standards into those things. So really trying to make sure that kids have a strong sense of place. Really want to make sure that there's, an understanding of like these many ways of knowing, and or what healthy commons mean. So these are our 10 standards. There's a lot of details that go with them, but these are another framework that we use when we're thinking about this. I was going to do a little task to have you rate these, but I think I'll pass on that this time. Or did you already put it in the chat, Carrie, the Mentimeter link?
No, I have not yet. I will right now. I'm sorry. I was writing words in the chat box. Sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay.
I'm back to my job.
I was going to tell you you don't have to do that, because for our time's sake, I think I'll just pass on doing that for right now. I just make you aware that these are there. These are something that we use as an organization. These are a couple other resources that we use that I think are really valuable. This big idea is of sustainability, because I think it's sometimes hard for people to know and understand. The other one on the right, which is a little bit not clear, but that's the whole school sustainability framework that comes from Colorado State. The big ideas of sustainability comes from Shelburne Farms and the Center for Environmental Literacy Foundation. But they're just really nice ways to think about this in the context of schools, of what are we talking about when we say sustainability, because that's sometimes for people somewhat ambiguous, and it's a big topic. But for us, we use a couple of these frameworks, and then it leads to us, we've created our own, what we call our green print. And the green print is our blueprint for a green, healthy, sustainable school. And it includes these 5 core practices that schools will assess themselves and gather data of how well are we doing these things. And from that data, we can tell what kind of support and resources they might need to help them go further. So the background on some of those other standards and frameworks, and it leads to us in our green print that we use with our schools and districts. When people partner with us, because we're working, like I said, with about 200 schools, we have these variety of ways that people are, it can be pretty low touch, to a pretty significant touch. Here at the Zuni Pueblo, we're focused on culture and climate, and it's almost entirely on social and emotional learning connected to the Ashiwa core values. So that's been my work here for the last 4 years, is working with some indigenous folks here, Zuni people, to take the castle competencies and connect them to the Ashiwa core values and really make sure that they're integrated within the school. So in other schools, in some districts, it's more around curriculum and instruction, and some it's a combination of things that we do with people. All of them, everyone we go into it is a partnership. I mean, everyone's different. And what we think of is that every place is different, their needs are different, but our whole goal is to advance the atmosphere of sustainability. Like, how do we do that? How do we accelerate that? Because honestly, we don't have much time. We need to be moving, and we need to be moving faster than what we're doing. We can't wait. And it's up to the people in this room today. It's up to us to make this impact and influence, is that, you know, we want to help people think about how to accelerate this work. So it's not easy. It's not easy work, because it's talking about change and transformational work. And as we all know, schools are struggle because we have almost set them up with a deficit perspective. It's not a perspective of abundance. So when we have this scarcity mindset, which exists in many, if not most schools, that it's a competitiveness for priorities and funding to make things happen. So there's a lot of people, I know Joe would be a good example of this, that has dreams and wants to do things, but is limited by financial and constraints of that time, energy, systems, policies that the state has in place. All those things contribute to us not doing this well, but don't contribute to us not doing anything. Like, we have to figure out how to do it and how to go faster. So that's what we're thinking a lot about. We use a lot of data to pull from to see how people are doing. This is an example of one principal, a school in Minnesota that I work with. And she, you know, is assessing her school on the green print, and based on the data, deciding where we want to be focused. And so there's these benchmarks that we have underneath each core practice, and each school kind of gives some assessments to gather that data and figure out where they want to focus. We also collect data around the operations of a school. So energy, water, waste. This is a school district outside of Madison, Wisconsin, that, and so we produce what's called a per student sustainability index. So all those schools within that district, we're looking at like their energy costs, and really get, you know, for the most part in schools and districts, very few people know how much they're spending on energy. Very few people know how much they're spending on water or on waste. And so we want the students and the teachers, we want everybody to know those things. We want them to know, just like if you're driving a Prius or a Tesla or whatever it might be, the data, if you have data in front of you and you see it, it influences your behavior. And so, you know, the same is at schools, to create dashboards where they're seeing what are we actually, how much, you know, what is our cost of energy? What is it on a monthly basis? How much waste are we producing? How much water are we using? Why is it so different between our schools? And why is some school using per student way more water than another school? And what's the reason for that? How could we cut it down? What would be our goal to do that? The goals, and when students are involved with that, you know, it gets exciting because you're decreasing your ecological footprint, but honestly, you're also lowering your costs for the school, which is great because you can then devote that to a lot of other things or good initiatives. So these are just important pieces. We think a lot about the SEL side, like I mentioned, and culture and climate. We use the CASTLE framework and the competencies, and also use Panorama Ed as a survey tool to gather the data around SEL. Because social emotional learning, everybody talks about it. We know it's important, but many people are not collecting data around it. And, you know, it's nice to have anecdotes and to say, hey, our kids are getting better, or we're focused on social awareness, but how do you know if you're making any improvements? You know, what's that look like? What kind of data are you collecting? And how can that impact and influence? The last thing I'll show you is that at the core, what we're really about is trying to shift mindsets and dispositions of people so that they take action that leads to sustainable, a sustainable world especially for humans. So these are two pieces of data that we're collecting around environmental optimism and this affinity for nature, that we know that, you know, our world causes a lot of anxiety because it's easy to look and see and feel depressed about where we are and where things are headed. But we also know that being depressed and being frustrated and being anxious does not necessarily lead to action. What does often leads to action and hope is optimism. So how are we facilitating as teachers in schools environmental optimism? And how are we, you know, connecting kids to nature and getting them outside and really understanding, you know, how wonderful and, you know, phenomenal nature is going to lead to this environmental optimism piece. So, you know, we need to collect data on it too, like, because if it's important for us, are we making a difference with this? We're working with Johns Hopkins right now and a couple of their researchers to create even more of these data sets, but I just will share these two with you and to think about in schools. All of our partner schools go through a leadership summit where we spend a chunk of time to really create an action plan around education for sustainability. So we worked with Harvard and creating this leadership summit, and it's awesome because when we do it for a district like Carson City, Nevada district, you know, with the superintendent, the assistant sup, the HR people, you know, getting everybody on board, the maintenance operations people, to really be focused on what are we doing as a district. We have our own strategic goals, but how do we make sure sustainability is a part of that as well and connected to that? And it's led to a lot of interesting things. So this particular school is in Carson City. It led us to focus on one school to become a pilot. It's a K-5 Title I school, about 500 students. So in Carson City, we did this district leadership summit, and it led to focusing on one school. Like, we're going to make this school kind of resonate and be the example for the whole rest of the district. They were a traditional elementary. This is really our first big year to do this work with them. And it's amazing. You know, these are the two goals that emerged after the leadership summit. I love the second one, especially because, you know, thinking about your school as a three-dimensional textbook forces you to think way differently about what's on your walls. How are you using your outdoor space? You know, how often are you getting kids outside? What kind of furniture do you have in the school? What kind of artwork do you have? What kind of traditions and values do people see when they walk in your school? How many plants are in a classroom, as an example? So they're thinking a lot about that, and it's fascinating to see what the transformation is happening and, you know, the impact that can have. This is another example of a district. It's outside of Los Angeles, Oak Park Unified School District. They really wanted to embrace the sustainable development goals throughout the district. And so that's, you know, that was their big thing that they've decided to do a couple of years ago. And it's fascinating when you decide to do that and create an action plan, how that just becomes pervasive in an entire district. So those are the big picture. I just want to share a couple of quick things, and I'm sorry for the not totally clear graphic here, but we think a lot about curriculum through this lens of what we now call 4 PBL. Instead of just project-based learning, we're talking about P4BL. So phenomenon, place, problem, and project. You know, kids can do some cool projects, and that's awesome to do cool projects, but if they're not connected to place, the local context, and they feel connected to it, like, it's cool to do a project about the plastic in the ocean if you're a second grader. I mean, like, okay, that's there. But if you're landlocked and you have no, you know, for many kids have never been to the ocean, it's harder to feel like, you know, that you can have a lot of optimism because you have a less chance to solve a problem and feel like you are a contributor. You have agency and you're empowered. So what's local that you can get excited about as a first grader and solve a problem with? And so that's what we think about is curriculum that thinks through this lens of this 4 PBL. You're going to get a document later about this, but I have a couple of resources that we'll be sharing with you. There are PDFs related to some of these things. This is another one. We're partnered right now with the Biomimicry Institute, amazing, wonderful organization out of Missoula. And they asked us to help create K-5 biomimicry lessons. So we've created now a group of 10 lessons, a unit for kindergarten through 5th grade teachers. And, with this P4BL framework, but also to think about like the biomimicry philosophy, which is 3 things. One is reconnect. So get reconnected to the natural world. An ethos, they talk a lot about the spirit of like being connected. And the third is emulate. So how can we look at things in the natural world and figure out how to emulate or design either products or systems that we see from the earth? Because Biomimicry Institute, their whole thing is like, Earth's been around 4 billion years. We as humans have been here a speck of that time. Equivalent, if we put it into 24 hours, 3 seconds that we humans have been here. So, there's a lot to learn from our Earth and everything around us. And if we disregard it, which oftentimes we do, we're doing it at our own peril. So that's the big piece that we're doing with them. Like I said, I'll send a document to you all related to that too. And these are just a couple examples I'm going to go through relatively quickly of schools and districts that are doing some different things. Some are doing things around curriculum. Here in Zuni, we're doing a lot of things, like I said, about SEL orientation. Carson City, it's around leadership and that focus there. And the other quick thing I would have mentioned is that there's several free resources that you'll find on our website that you could pull from and use as well. So these are a couple of things that are there, social justice materials and things to find. We produce a journal called the Catalyst Quarterly. It's designed for K-12. It's a peer-reviewed journal. And it's got some amazing case studies and just great examples of work that's happening in schools around the country as both inspiration and ideas. So one of them was on climate literacy, and there's some just really cool things in there about civic engagement and creating the future. This particular article, which I'll send to you, is all about having students, and they call them solutionary units, and having students be problem solvers. And it's like one of those 4 Ps, what that looks like. One of our more recent ones is thinking about, how can we keep sustainability on the forefront in the middle of a pandemic? So that's got some really good case studies of different schools and districts doing different interesting things. I have a short video too of us as an organization, but I'm not going to share that or show it right this second. It's only, it's a few minutes long, but we'll make sure you have a link to that. You can watch at your own pleasure. The last thing I would just offer and just put out there that we think about is that, as a nonprofit, we try to make it as easy as possible to work with schools and districts. And some are paying for it out of their different funds. Some of us are through grants. We're working with Tesla in Nevada right now, and they're paying for a significant amount of our work. In Virginia, it's Dominion Energy that's paying for a lot of the work. There are a variety of organizations that are willing and able to step up and support this work in schools. And what we find and what you all can help be advocates for is that schools and districts have a lot on their plate, and it's hard for them to think about and see that doing this type of work is, they often see it as important, but not necessarily as the priority, because the priority oftentimes comes back to our test scores and what we're being ranked upon by the state. And so like helping them see that this could be done and there are funds available to help make it happen helps get people very excited. So anyway, I wanted to run through things really quickly so that you all could ask some questions. Plus, you're very welcome at any time to reach out to me, and I could go further and give you way more, a wide variety of examples of other schools and districts across the country. But I wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions. And then when we're almost to finish, I've got an awesome video that I want to make sure you all get to see. So that was Fast and Furious on Green Schools National Network. thanks initially doing the SDG example work, but what questions do you have? What things would you want to know just a little bit more about?
Well, first, do you want to unshare your screen so we can all see each other? That would
Yes,
be nice.
there you
Thank
go.
you.
Sorry, Carrie.
Natalie, I think, did Natalie have a right hand?
Yeah, thank you. So David, thank you so much for all this. It's very inspiring and motivating. When you said you just closed with there are funds available, like if the school or school district is interested in possibly, becoming a partner, how are those funds? Like, when is it determined that maybe that could happen? Do you first look into local funding, and like, who does that work?
Good question, because oftentimes it comes back down to that, is that, where are the funds? How can we make this happen? We honestly, that people can be a member, like if you could be an individual member of our organization for, I think, $100. So it's very cheap. Or you can be a school partner if a school wanted to be a partner with us for a couple $1,000s, and then that gives them access to all these professional development opportunities. And then it goes up to, our largest school or district is maybe spending close to $100,000 a year that is working with us. And they're doing a lot of stuff with us. But that particular work, the most that people are investing is coming from Tesla. And so sometimes that takes a couple years to develop the relationships and to figure out what we can do together. But we provide some, I think, valuable sort of material that helps those organizations see what their investment could do. Honestly, Natalie, to be just totally frank, the bigger impediment is not the money. The bigger impediment is just for a district or school to see this as a priority. If they feel like it's a priority, they either find the money to do it, or we help them find the money to do it. So yeah, it's out there and available.
Great, thank you.
I would just maybe add to that. I mean, my challenge, Carrie probably understands this, and Dave, I know you do too, is probably attitudes of the community. And but we have some really good grant people, and I also know Dave to be a coach in helping deal with cultures of community and helping to navigate those and change that. So Dave, do you still do that? Is that part of this deal? Like, can you coach me up a little?
I don't know how much I could coach you, Joe. You would teach me a lot, I know, but that's part of what we do. Is we are a support for superintendents, for curriculum instruction people, for school principals. That's oftentimes what I end up working with, is a lot of principals, it's frankly just finding and seeing resources. Some of these that maybe you all saw today, maybe for the first time. I like education for sustainability standards. Many people don't even know that they're out there, or what those are, or how would that work? How are schools layering those in to the standards that they're expected to teach with literacy and math and science? So yeah, that's the work that we do, Joe, is helping support folks and, finding the resources or the connections to make that happen.
Yeah, and I think it's probably stuff Carrie could help us with too. I mean, shoot, we're dealing with people that have a problem talking about critical race theory and things like that right now. I mean, we just have sort of a playbook on one side of the field here that's coming at us for stuff that, like, I can't even bring this up right now, or we're gonna get accused of being some type of demographic or whatever. But you know me, Dave. I mean, this is what we should be talking about. This is what we should all be talking about. So, but we got a conservative community that's hard to maybe shift gears in, but I want to talk to you about it some later.
Yeah, it's such a good point, Joe. And just to give you a quick, Virginia Beach School District is, I think for the size of that area, is the 4th most conservative community in the country. And they have more LEED certified schools than any school district in the country. And so they've been able to do significant work, like I mentioned about their food programs, but they haven't couched it in talking about environment. It's all been around conservation with money and sustainability. So there's a variety of ways to think about the language that we use, but yeah, but it's not easy. It's not easy road to navigate.
It's
So that makes sense. That gives me hope for sure.
Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of touch on the point that Natalie made about, or I can't remember when we were doing our little sticky notes, and just how having the students be mindful about this type of work. And I mean, the whole crisis that we're going through in our schools and the mental anguish that our students are experiencing, if we could provide something like the school gardens. I mean, a PUSD, I don't know about Humboldt, but I know Prescott's really rocking it on the gardens, and like everybody loves a garden. Like, I'm not sure we can, they can take that and make it awful or vilify it. And so it's just like Joe said, we have to, and it's really about just shifting. It's a paradigm shift of the students and the attitude and that optimism. So giving them something positive to work toward, I think is really essential. And you just have to start to do it, and it really has to come from the school community, and I think that you're doing that with the VISTA programs. I'm working a lot with Sarah, and Annie Baker is starting to work with you too. So yeah, I'm happy to help any way. And Jenna, she's up in Flagstaff, but we want to bridge all the work, especially with the schools. I know that NASCA is very interested in figuring out ways to include climate, curriculum and education, what it's about. So, but, in a nice, simple way.
Carrie, I want to just add, thank you for that. Some of the challenges that I've seen in schools and districts, if on school gardens in particular, if they're not connected entirely to the curriculum, and so that the kindergartners, the first graders, the second graders, the third graders are all like, their standards around literacy and reading and math and science are in some ways, if they're not, then a lot of schools and districts struggle to keep their garden programs going, because it relies on an outside entity, a parent, or a very strong advocate teacher, that when that teacher leaves, the garden just becomes who knows what. So it has to become systemic. It has to become part of, this is just what we do. The kindergartners do the composting, the first graders do the vermiculture, the second graders do the planting, third graders do the harvesting, whatever it might be. But that's where we see the most success.
I love how much you've talked about kind of a whole system approach, because I think we've all probably made efforts or seen efforts that were made that failed, and really understanding why, and you bringing up that it has to be, a whole system working together really makes sense to me. And I think that's something we can all kind of strive to work towards, is everything being a whole system approach to all the work we do.
Yeah, good point. Thanks, Jenna. There's a good quote I heard recently, that we often overestimate what we can do in 1 year, but we underestimate what we can do in 5 years. And so I always think that that's important to look at the long game, what is it that we want to do? And let's just, even if it's starting small with stuff, let's start a little bit at a time, because we can get there, but we have to start. Good questions. Anything else people want to share or have a question about? You certainly can reach out anytime, any of you, to me or through Carrie. Very happy and glad to be with you today, and thanks for the opportunity. So, it's always great to see Carrie, but and Jenna, who I've gotten to know, but and see Mr. Howard, who I was just commenting that Joe and I go back quite a few years, and I've got all the gray hair and he has none. So I don't know how that's happened, but that's pretty impressive. But thank you all for being here today, being engaged and interested in this topic. And
I have one more question. Is that okay?
Yeah.
You mentioned the leadership summit, and is that, I assume, I mean, maybe right now because of COVID, that's all done virtually, but how is that normally done?
Yeah, this last year we did them all virtually. So it's typically like a 10-hour experience. It's like a series of workshops. Sometimes a school or district does them in 2 days. Sometimes they do them over the course of a month, but it's a series of workshops, essentially like 5 2-hour workshops that leads to a multi-year action plan that's connected to their strategic goals that they already have in place for the school or the district. Yeah. But in person, we often do it in a day and a half, like a late afternoon, and then spend a day together with a core group of people.
David, did you want to do that? Did you want to share a movie, a short movie, or
yeah,
or do you want
I
to
think this.
put it?
Yeah, if you don't mind sharing it, Carrie, that link and bring it up and watch it. I think it's a good way to finish for us to watch Amanda Gorman, who many, if not all of you know, who was there during the inauguration and became, notorious for her amazing poem that she shared. She has another poem called EARTHRISE that, to me, every time I see it, it's inspirational. It gives me goosebumps. And I think it'd be a great way for us to finish and maybe look for and think about some words that she shares. And she's a master poet and spoken word artist. But the words that you hear, that's what we'll close with, is the inspiration that you hear from her, a word or two via this video.
Okay, I'm working on it.
Okay.
Okay, hold on. Again, Dave is just keeping me on my toes here with some kind of buffering. Okay, hold on. Oh, goodness. All right, Jenna is just laughing right now. I can feel her. Okay, sharing. I know it's like I'm being punished. I'm going to share sound and optimize for video clip, and we're going to do this. I'm so inspired. Come on. All right.
On Christmas Eve, 1968, astronaut Bill Anders snapped a photo of the Earth as Apollo 8 orbited the moon. Those three guys were surprised to see from their eyes what planet looked like an Earthrise, a blue orb hovering over the moon's gray horizon with deep oceans and silver skies. It was our world's first glance at itself, a first chance to see a shared reality, a declared stance, and a commonality, a glimpse into our planet's mirror. And as threats drew nearer, our own urgency became clearer as we realized that we hold nothing dearer than this floating body we all call home. We've known that we're caught in the throes of climactic changes some say will just go away, while some simply pray to survive another day. For it is the obscure, the oppressed, the poor who, when the disaster is declared done, still suffer more than anyone. Climate change is the single greatest challenge of our time. Of this, you're certainly aware. It's saddening, but I cannot spare you from knowing an inconvenient fact, because it's getting the facts straight that gets us to act and not to wait. So I tell you this not to scare you, but to prepare you, to dare you to dream a different reality where, despite disparities, we all care to protect this world, this riddled blue marvel, this little true marvel, to master the verve and the nerve to see how we can serve our planet. You don't need to be a politician to make it your mission to conserve, to protect, to preserve that one and only home that is ours. To use your unique power to give next generations the planet they deserve. We are demonstrating, creating, advocating. We heed this inconvenient truth because we need to be anything but lenient with the future of our youth. And while this is a training in sustaining the future of our planet, there is no rehearsal. The time is now, because the reversal of harm and protection of a future so universal should be anything but controversial. So, Earth, pale blue dots. We will fail you not, just as we chose to go to the moon. We know it's never too soon to choose hope. We choose to do more than cope with climate change. We choose to end it. We refuse to lose. We do this and more, not because it's very easy or nice, but because it is necessary. Because with every dawn, we carry the weight of the fates of this celestial body orbiting a star. And as heavy as that weight sounded, it doesn't hold us down, but it keeps us grounded, steady, ready, because an environmental movement of this size is simply another form of an Earthrise. To see it, close your eyes, visualize that all of us in this room and outside of these walls or in these halls, all of us change makers, or in a spacecraft floating like a silver raft in space, and we see the face of a planet anew. We relish the view, we witness its round green and brilliant blue, which inspires us to ask deeply, wholly, what can we do? Open your eyes, know the future of this wise planet is right in sight, right in all of us. Trust this earth uprising, all of us bring light to exciting solutions never tried before, for it is our hope that implores us at our uncompromising core to keep rising up for an earth more than worth fighting for.
Well, thanks, Carrie. Thanks everybody for listening to that. I hope it was inspirational and has us ready to master the verb and the nerve to serve and see how we can conserve and preserve. So thanks everybody. Have a good rest of your evening. Yeah, I look forward to our paths crossing again sometime soon.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, David. That was wonderful, and I appreciate the ending. It was good to see you all. Definitely reach out to Carrie and I if you need to get in touch with David, but we will send a follow-up email with all of these wonderful resources. And I know this was kind of a small group we invited today, but if you know others in your community, like if we can get together a group of parents or activists in one of these communities, I am pretty sure David would meet with us again to kind of talk about options in the area. So that's exciting if anyone is interested. And yeah, I put a link to our next event in the chat box. It's on Wednesday with Citizens Climate Lobby to kind of dive into what carbon pricing is and some upcoming opportunities to get engaged in that. And I think that's all I have. Have a wonderful weekend, and thank you so much for being here on a Friday afternoon. And thank you, David.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Have a great weekend.